Most people see the cut, the patches, the road-worn leather, and they cross the street before the biker even looks their way. But when Marcus Grave Hendricks opened his motel door that cold November afternoon and found a 7-year-old girl standing in the hallway with tears streaking her face, whispering 6 words that would crack open something he'd kept locked away for 15 years, he discovered that the hardest thing a man can face isn't a rival club or a lonely highway. It's a child asking for something you don't know how to give. The story began 3 hours earlier when Marcus rolled his Harley into the gravel lot of the Pineview Motor Lodge outside Cascade Falls, Oregon. He'd been riding since dawn from Boise, heading nowhere in particular the way he often did when the walls started closing in. The Iron Reaper's patch on his back marked him as Nomad Chapter, which meant home was wherever he parked his bike, and sleep came in roadside motels that smelled of stale cigarette smoke and industrial cleaning solution. The Pineview wasn't much to look at. Single story, faded blue paint, neon vacancy sign flickering weakly against the gray afternoon sky. But the price was right, and the parking lot was empty enough that Marcus could keep an eye on his bike from the window. He checked in without conversation, the clerk barely glancing up from his phone as he slid a key across the counter. Room 14. Ground floor, far end. Marcus unpacked his saddlebags with the methodical efficiency of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. Extra clothes. Toiletries. The worn paperback he'd been carrying for 3 states without reading past chapter 2. He set his boots beside the bed, stretched out on top of the covers, and stared at the water-stained ceiling while the heater rattled in the corner. That was when the knock came. Soft. Hesitant. Not the sharp rap of a motel manager or the aggressive pound of someone looking for trouble. Marcus sat up slowly, instincts sharpening. He glanced through the window. No cars nearby. No movement in the parking lot. He stood and opened the door halfway, keeping his frame in the gap. A little girl stood in the hallway. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old, wearing a pink winter coat 2 sizes too big and mismatched sneakers that had seen better days. Her dark hair was pulled into uneven pigtails, and her brown eyes were red-rimmed from crying. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Marcus scanned the hallway behind her. Empty. You lost? He asked quietly. The girl shook her head quickly. No, sir. Your parents know you're knocking on strangers' doors? She looked down at her shoes. I don't have a daddy. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. He crouched down slowly, so they were closer to eye level, though his size still made him imposing. Where's your mom? Working. She cleans the rooms. The girl gestured vaguely down the hallway. We live here sometimes. That explained the worn clothes, the shadows under her eyes. The Pineview was the kind of place people landed when the floor kept dropping out from under them. What's your name? Marcus asked. Sophie. Okay, Sophie. Why are you knocking on my door? She twisted her hands together nervously, gathering courage. Then the words came out in a rush. My school has a Thanksgiving play tomorrow, and all the kids' dads are coming, and I need someone to pretend to be my daddy, so I'm not the only one without one. The request hit Marcus harder than he expected. He straightened up slightly, thrown off balance by the directness of it. Sophie kept talking, faster now, as if afraid he'd say no before she finished. I know you don't know me, but my friend Emma said sometimes grown-ups help if you just ask, and I saw your motorcycle, and I thought maybe you were the kind of person who does brave things. Marcus stared at her, caught between disbelief and something deeper he didn't want to name. Kid, I'm not, please. Her voice cracked. Everyone else has somebody. I just need you to sit there. You don't have to say anything. Just so I'm not alone. The desperation in her eyes was the same desperation Marcus had seen in his own daughter's face 15 years ago when he'd walked out after the divorce, choosing the road over the life he didn't know how to fix. He'd promised himself he'd come back. He never did. And by the time he finally tried, his ex-wife had moved across the country and his daughter had stopped answering his letters. He looked at Sophie standing in the hallway of a cheap motel, asking a stranger for something that should have been given freely, and he felt the weight of every mistake he'd ever made pressing down on his shoulders. What time's the play? He heard himself ask. Sophie's face lit up like sunrise. 2 o'clock. At Cascade Elementary. Marcus nodded once, slow and deliberate. I'll be there. He didn't know yet that keeping that promise would unravel a secret the town had been hiding for years. The next afternoon, Marcus stood in the parking lot of Cascade Elementary School feeling more out of place than he ever had in a roadside bar fight. The building was small and cheerful, covered in construction paper turkeys and hand-traced autumn leaves, and the lot was filled with minivans and sedans that looked nothing like his Harley sitting at the far edge, like a mechanical wolf among sheep. He debated not showing up, told himself the kid would forget, that someone else would step in, that he wasn't the right person for this. But when 2 o'clock approached, he found himself pulling on his cleanest shirt and riding across town anyway, because the look in Sophie's eyes had reminded him too much of the daughter he'd failed. Inside, the hallway smelled like floor wax and cafeteria food. Construction paper pilgrims lined the walls. Marcus followed the sound of voices to the gymnasium, where rows of folding chairs faced a makeshift stage decorated with cardboard trees and a banner reading, "Our Thanksgiving Story." Parents filled most of the seats, chatting easily while children in pilgrim hats and Native American headbands peeked nervously from behind a curtain. Marcus scanned the crowd, feeling dozens of eyes turned toward him, conversations pausing as people registered the leather vest, the beard, the outsider presence. Then he saw Sophie. She stood near the side of the stage in a white pilgrim dress that looked homemade, her face scanning the audience anxiously. When their eyes met, her entire expression transformed. She waved frantically, bouncing on her toes, and pointed toward an empty seat in the 3rd row. Marcus made his way down the aisle, hyper-aware of the stares following him. He lowered himself into the folding chair, which creaked under his weight. A woman beside him smiled politely, then glanced at his vest and found somewhere else to look. The lights dimmed. The play began. It was exactly what Marcus expected. Children reciting lines about cooperation and harvest, a few forgotten cues, one kid picking his nose center stage. But every time Sophie appeared, she looked directly at Marcus, her smile bright and genuine, and something inside him that had been frozen for years began to thaw. Halfway through the 2nd act, Marcus noticed something. A man in the back row, late 30s, wearing a too-nice suit for a small-town elementary school play. He wasn't watching the stage. He was watching the audience, his gaze moving systematically from parent to parent, lingering on faces, checking something on his phone. When his eyes reached Marcus, they stopped. The man's expression shifted, surprise, then calculation. He stood abruptly and slipped out of the gym. Marcus's instincts flared. That wasn't the behavior of a concerned parent. That was reconnaissance. He waited until the play ended and applause filled the room before standing. Sophie ran over immediately, still wearing her pilgrim hat. "You came," she said breathlessly. "Told you I would. Did you like it?" "You were great." Her smile could have powered the whole building. Then a woman approached, mid-30s, tired eyes, wearing a motel cleaning uniform. Sophie's mother. "You must be the man Sophie mentioned," she said carefully, extending her hand. "I'm Rachel." Marcus shook it. "Marcus." Rachel's grip was firm despite her exhaustion. "I don't know why you said yes, but thank you." It meant everything to her. She did get up there. Rachel glanced around the emptying gym, lowering her voice. Sophie has a way of finding the good in people, even when they don't see it themselves. Before Marcus could respond, a teacher hurried over, a young woman with a strained smile. "Excuse me, are you Sophie's father?" "He's my friend," Sophie said quickly. The teacher hesitated. "There's a man outside asking questions. Says he's from Child Protective Services. He wants to speak with Sophie's family." Rachel's face went pale. "CPS? What? I don't know. But he seemed very interested when he saw Sophie performing." Marcus felt the pieces click together. The man in the back row, the phone, the sudden interest. Rachel's hands trembled as she pulled Sophie closer. "We haven't done anything wrong." The teacher looked uncomfortable. "I'm sure it's just routine, but he's waiting in the main office." Marcus watched Rachel's fear bloom into full panic, and he recognized it instantly. The terror of someone living on the edge, knowing one wrong move could cost them everything. "Don't go alone," Marcus said quietly. Rachel looked at him, surprised. "If something feels off," he continued, "it probably is. And you deserve to know what this is really about before you walk into that office." Sophie gripped her mother's hand tighter. "Is someone trying to take me away?" "No, baby." Rachel's voice cracked. "No one's taking you anywhere." But Marcus had seen enough of the world to know that promises like that didn't always hold. And as they walked toward the main office together, he realized the simple favor he'd agreed to had just become something much more complicated. The main office was small and overheated, smelling of coffee and copy paper. The man in the suit stood near the secretary's desk, projecting authority he hadn't actually established. He looked up when they entered, his expression smoothing into professional concern. "Mrs. Harper?" he said, extending his hand toward Rachel. "I'm David Brennan. I work with the County Family Services Division." Rachel didn't take his hand. "Why are you here?" Brennan's smile tightened. "Just a routine check. We received a report about Sophie's living situation and wanted to ensure everything's appropriate." "What report?" Marcus asked. Brennan glanced at him dismissively. "And you are?" Someone asking what report. The tension in the room sharpened. Brennan pulled out a tablet, scrolling with deliberate slowness. "According to our files, Sophie has been periodically homeless, living in motels and transitional housing. We have a responsibility to investigate whether the environment is stable." Rachel's voice shook. "We have a room. I have a job. Sophie goes to school every day. At the Pineview Motor Lodge," Brennan said flatly. "Not exactly a permanent residence." Marcus stepped closer. "Lots of families are one paycheck away from hard times. Doesn't make them unfit." Brennan finally looked at him fully. "Mr. Hendricks. Mr. Hendricks, this is a matter for family services and the parent. Unless you have legal standing, he's my friend," Sophie said again, louder this time. "He came to my play." Something flickered in Brennan's expression. Not compassion, calculation. "I see." He made a note on his tablet. "Well, given the instability and now the presence of unknown adults in Sophie's life, I think we need to schedule a formal assessment." Rachel's breath caught. "You can't just take her." "I'm not taking anyone today. But if the assessment determines the living situation is inadequate, we may need to explore temporary placement." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. He'd seen this before. Bureaucrats using authority like a weapon, pushing people who couldn't push back. But something about Brennan felt wrong. Too aggressive. Too eager. "What's the real reason you're here?" Marcus asked quietly. Brennan's mask slipped for half a second. "Excuse me. You weren't watching the play. You were watching the parents. Like you were looking for something specific." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Brennan closed his tablet. "I think we're done here." But Marcus didn't move. Neither did Rachel. And in the hallway beyond the office, several other parents had gathered, drawn by the raised voices, including a woman Marcus recognized from the audience, a school board member, judging by her name tag. She stepped inside. "Is there a problem?" Brennan straightened. "Just routine child welfare business." "Routine?" The woman looked at Rachel. "I've known the Harpers for 2 years. Sophie's thriving here. This doesn't sound routine." Another parent spoke up. "My wife works at county services. If there was a legitimate complaint, there'd be a supervisor present." Brennan's composure cracked. "I don't have to justify." "Yeah, you do." Marcus pulled out his phone. "Especially if you're operating outside proper channels." For a long moment, Brennan stared at him, weighing options. Then his expression hardened. "You have no idea what you're interfering with. Then explain it." Instead, Brennan turned and walked out, moving quickly through the growing crowd of parents who parted warily to let him pass. The school board member immediately pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the actual county office. Something about that man wasn't right." Within an hour, the truth began to surface. David Brennan wasn't with Family Services. He was a private investigator hired by a regional foster care agency under investigation for falsifying placements to maximize federal funding. They targeted vulnerable families, manufactured crises, and funneled children into the system where they could be monetized. Sophie had appeared on their radar because of the motel address. The school play had been his opportunity to confirm details and build a case. If Marcus hadn't been there, if the other parents hadn't questioned him, Rachel might have lost Sophie to a system designed to exploit rather than protect. The real county services arrived, apologized, and confirmed Rachel and Sophie's situation was being handled appropriately through existing community support programs. As the sun set outside Cascade Elementary, Marcus stood in the parking lot watching Sophie and Rachel walk toward their car. Sophie turned back and waved, her pilgrim hat still crooked on her head. Rachel paused beside him. "You didn't have to do any of this." Marcus shrugged. "Kid asked me to show up. I showed up. It was more than that." Rachel's eyes were wet. "You saw something wrong and you didn't walk away. Most people would have." "Yeah, well." Marcus looked at his Harley, then back at them. "I've walked away from enough things in my life." Before he could say more, his phone buzzed. A text from a number he hadn't seen in years. His daughter. Dad, someone told me you helped a kid in Oregon. Is that true? His hands trembled slightly as he typed back. Yeah, it's true. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, I'd like to hear about it. If you want to talk. Marcus stared at the screen, 15 years of distance compressing into a single fragile possibility. Sophie called out from the car. Will you come to my winter concert? He looked up, then at Rachel, who smiled softly. You're welcome anytime. Marcus nodded. I'll be there. As they drove away and the parking lot emptied, Marcus sat on his bike without starting the engine. For the first time in longer than he could remember, the road ahead didn't feel like running away. It felt like a path that might actually lead somewhere. He texted his daughter back. I'd like that too. Then he started the Harley, the engine's rumble steady and strong, and rode into the Oregon evening knowing that sometimes showing up is the bravest thing a man can do. And sometimes, when you stop running long enough to stand still for someone else, you find the thing you've been searching for all along. 3 months later, Marcus would attend that winter concert. And 6 months after that, he'd meet his daughter for coffee in Seattle, starting the slow work of rebuilding what he'd broken. But it all began with a little girl in a hallway, asking a stranger to be brave enough to stay.